Welcome, folks, to this edition of Insights with NetSupport. I'm Al Kingsley, and as we like to do, we bring in guests from all around the world to talk around, well, frankly, any kind of topic that's linked to technology, education, future careers, the list goes on. This week, I am really pleased to have Jim Love joining us. Jim, welcome to the show. Looking at your short bio, because the long one is quite a lot more extensive, you are CIO, Chief Digital Officer at IT World Canada, Canada's leading ICT publishing and digital marketing title. And you're also the host of Hashtag Trending, a daily news podcast focusing on business and technology. And just when you have a bit of free time, you're also author of Digital Transformation in the First Person. So plenty of technology avenues that we could unpick and explore.
And a good musician too.
And a good musician. Well, that is important. Can I ask which instrument?
Guitar. I have 2 albums out in the past 5 years. I'm making tens of dollars on my musical career, so you can see why I became a CIO. Yeah.
Well, if I'd have known that, we could have had an interlude during our conversation. But my skills peaked at the recorder, so possibly I wouldn't be able to support you in any constructive way. Listen, Jim, before we dive in, I wanted to ask, obviously, I've introduced you in terms of your role at IT World Canada. For those of us with our international audience at Insights with NetSupport, could you share a little bit of the highlight about the title and the different roles that you have and target audience?
Sure. Yeah. I've been in technology, believe it or not, for almost 45 years now. And I came into IT World about 10 years ago. It's a publisher, and it's an iconic publisher. It was a thing that everybody read in the tech industry and still hopefully continues to. And I ended up crazily buying half of the company with my partner Fawn Annan, and we turned it around at the time when print was going digital. So that's hence the book, Digital Transformation in the First Person. But my job here is I run the technology. I actually also run the editorial piece of it. I'm a tech guy with a degree in literature, so that worked out quite nicely.
So a busy man, that's for sure.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, listen, I'm really keen to pick your brains. It's lovely to meet people who have got different experiences of the use of technology in all different areas. And quite often within the remit of Insights with NetSupport, we're talking about education and technology. But actually, there's a really nice segue there, because obviously we're looking at future skills, what the workplace needs. And recently, I've had quite a few conversations that have been around the topic of those things that we often call soft skills, actually, from an employer perspective, now being considered more super skills. They're really the skills that our employers are looking at. So I wanted to kind of kick things off around a topic that I know you'll have some views on in terms of college degrees. We've seen in the tech sector, many tech CEOs perhaps changing their prioritization on degrees. So what are your thoughts in terms of emphasis and need for those kind of degree level of qualifications now?
Yeah. And first thing on the soft skills, and this is not critique of you or anybody else. I cringe. Like, it's like nails on a blackboard when I hear the word soft skills. They're skills. And they're very important. But back to the question you asked, which is, are we changing our mind? Yes, I think we are, slowly, and in Canada more slowly possibly than other places. We're generally, when I started out, I hit a ceiling very quickly that I couldn't get past if I didn't have a degree. And I told you when I started this out, I started out as a musician, not as a tech guy. And so I dropped out of university thinking I was cool and all that sort of stuff, and had other things to do, and life was good, and went back later because I'd hit a ceiling. I was not going to get past that level unless I had a degree in Canada. It's just not going to happen. It didn't matter how good you were. And so I went back, and I will tell you other story. My eyes were opened about why why what the importance of university or college, four-year college, whatever you want to call it, degrees in there. But it's in a world where we have shortages, where and I'm not gonna take anything away from the why somebody should get a degree. But in a world where you have shortages, why would you choke yourself off because people don't have a degree if they have the capacity to do the job that you want? And this is, this is we have a crisis in cybersecurity and in technology in general. But I'm telling you, you do not need to have an advanced degree to be a programmer. You need really pretty good math skills, you know,
Yeah.
some pretty good skills in terms of problem solving and things like that. But those could be learned in the University of Hard Knocks or on YouTube or watching whatever you do. You can learn a lot from other sources. You don't have to be in a university to learn those things. Uh, and so we cut ourselves off from a huge part of the marketplace, including people who might want to be returning to work. People who might not be on, who maybe in different cultures or different areas of the country. In Canada, we have a lot of Indigenous people, and maybe they didn't get through university, because it's quite easy to. When I was a kid, it was easier to, but it's relatively in world standards pretty easy to get a degree here. And I'm not taking away the work you have to do, you can afford it if you really put your mind to it. But other people, but just because of the way their lives have rolled out, might not
Mm.
be able to do that. And so we cut ourselves off from a vast number of people at a time when we really need them. I'll give you the example that I came up with that I just loved. Was somebody was saying in the classic job descriptions, and a lot of CIOs talk about this. The job descriptions are written by HR. I don't need, walks on water, and is not a criteria I need. But one person who was really turned out to be excellent in cybersecurity was a chef. Now, if you did the classic thing of all of the qualifications for somebody working in a cybersecurity or a knock or SOC or any place in cybersecurity, you wouldn't pick this person. None of the qualifications be on a job description. But think about it. You want somebody who's going to make great decisions under pressure, who can remember a tremendous amount of things at little details that are in there, assess all of those in a very, very high pressure environment and come up with the right answer. Right? Somebody's got a tremendous attention to detail. We're talking a chef. This is somebody who wanted a career change and would have been skipped. And I think probably a brilliant way to assess somebody or to get the right skills in people. And that's what CIOs are complaining about, and HR is listening to some degree.
I think that's it's really interesting, and it does resonate with experiences, certainly within Europe, where I think there's two strands we can think as close as home for me is in the UK, where we've seen apprenticeships that were traditionally the trades and skills moving
Yep.
to be the full gamut, digital business skills and so on, and that's proven much more attractive for some as a pathway to achieving qualifications whilst also learning. But I think there's also been an employer shift, which is one to the mindset of there's actually more value in grow your own sometimes,
Yep.
depending on the particular skill set. But also that sense that where we prioritize, back to that word before skills that I won't mention for a second time.
Yep.
But in the serious sense about actually the priorities for employers are people who have those that level of resilience, those critical thinking skills, those the confidence and communication skills. Now, of course, if we're training to be a surgeon, we want to make sure you've got those foundation skills as well. But this is about sectors
Yes, there are
changing and the
certain
blend, isn't it?
places. Yeah, no, there are certain places where you must have advanced degrees and must have advanced skills. And those are clear in there. But in many places, you just don't need the level of skills that are there. The flip side of that is the what I'd call degree snobbery. And I taught at university for a long time. I do not have a PhD. And if I heard from one more PhD about and it's always sort of like it's very polite. We're in academia, and it's well, of course, I'm not saying anything about people who we brought in from industry. Yeah, right. Yes, you are. But so I've been through that, and I will tell you that I have tremendous admiration for what people have learned in advanced degrees. I have tremendous admiration for what people have learned in life and in application of skills too. Doesn't mean that one excludes the other. And we anyway, back to this thing. We have this almost this snobbery about degrees, and and you'll find it people maybe their career choice doesn't require that. Maybe they want to be an electrician. Maybe my son's a video editor. He does not need an advanced degree to be a video editor. He knew it at 14. My daughter's a game writer, and she, just to keep the family tradition alive, dropped out like a month before she finished her degree, just on principle. But she's tremendously successful.
Yeah.
And so you can be. There's some warnings about that though, and I have some concerns about the lack of the preparation that a degree or a good educational program gives you to be resilient in life and be able to make changes faster.
Maybe we'll come on to that as a bit of a pros and cons, Jim, because there's always
Yeah.
different sides to it. I like your point in terms of the snobbery. I don't like it, but I absolutely resonate with that mindset. In the UK, we took a view that actually, if apprenticeships where perhaps parents of students were thinking in terms of the traditional trades, if they were renamed as workplace degrees, somehow they would seem more aspirational for their child in terms of their education and their pathway.
Yeah. My brother-in-law ran a hydro plant that supplied power to most of central Canada. If he made a mistake, he could take the grid down. He had grade 12, which is our I guess I don't know what the equivalent is in the UK of that, but it's really just the end of our high school.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they put him through immense training and educational opportunities. That's the other piece is we have this education doesn't end at the end of your degree, and it gets stale really fast if you don't advance it. And I dream of having that education embedded in the workplace, in there. But also, because somebody's an electrician or in the trades doesn't mean they're not interested in poetry. Doesn't mean they're not interested in films. Doesn't mean they're not interested in literature. It just means that the path to their current employment is a different set of skills.
Absolutely. And I think what I always try and encourage and celebrate is there's different pathways for different learners, and some will
Yeah.
be degrees and some won't. What is interesting though, Jim, on that point is we are seeing the workplace becoming hybrid. We're seeing an ever digital world. If we want equity of access to learning and skills and jobs, then increasingly that place-based limitation means such that actually pathways into the workplace that include learning at the same time and professional development actually
Yeah.
can be much more accessible to those communities that don't have immediate access, whether it's financially or physically, to a college pathway.
Yeah, and you need to work that out as a strategy. The first thing is whether you think of it as equity or just really good economics, it doesn't matter. You can't be in a world where we're going to compete with, and everyone knows it, the next generation of competition is not going to be with who's got the most natural resources or who's got this. It's going to be who has the smartest people. And that's the economic competition. We can already see it. I mean, we can see it around the world. This is not unite the right, or they say in politics, is unite the bright, and that's what we're going to do. So a country that cuts itself off from educational opportunity, if you want equality of opportunity, cutting yourself off from opportunity of education is the craziest, the worst cost saving you can possibly make in there. And so that's great. There's some great programs in the UK I just love, because in Canada compared to the US, our university education is still relatively affordable. It's too expensive. It should be free in my mind, like it is in Germany. But I'll take what we've got over what the US has got. But I heard of a great program in the UK and we're trying to adopt it at one of the universities here in Canada, where you can go to school and work. So you work, several weeks or several days, and you go back to classes on a Friday, whatever it is. They have a schedule for it, but you're getting a university education while working. So for people who are single parents or who didn't have the parent, the parentage or they didn't have the money to start out like that, this is a tremendous opportunity. We need more of this.
I totally agree. We often think of education pathways in college as always being an 18-year-old child moving into next education, but tapping into that. There's a large part of our workforce that want to reskill, change direction of
Yep.
career, or re-enter the workforce. Then we need to think bigger in terms of that accessibility and that flexibility with life, because
Yeah.
life is the barrier for many.
Yeah, and learning in time. My kids both, like I said, my kids both dropped out. Will they go back? Probably. I think they're both bright kids. They may appreciate a future education, a university education, or whatever at a later date, but not now. And so, is that wrong? No, you're going to get it. You're going to get educated. When I went back, I'll just sorry, one story. I went back after being a dropout to thinking I knew everything and all that sort of stuff. I went back and I went back and I was, because I was paying my own way and working and doing it at night, I was really, really, really interested in learning. I wanted to learn everything. And the lights that didn't turn on for me at 17 when I'd graduated straight A's and went to university, far too young, at age 23, the lights went on. And I went, there's all this stuff. Why didn't I stay in university? I could have learned all of this. I took everything. I mean, I took everything from psych. It took me ages to finish because I couldn't find a major. I was just fascinated by everything. And I, I I can't think of a single course from that period of my life that I haven't used effectively in one of my careers.
I think that gives me quite a nice segue, because, like all these things we've kind of articulated, there's pros and cons, and there's different pathways for different learners at different points in their life. If you could provide one kind of thing you might lose or you might gain from that pathway for a 4-year college degree, could you encapsulate one for each of those pros and cons, Jim?
What you might lose in both the US and Canada, I can't say anything but Europe in there because I just don't know enough about it, is you graduate with an immense amount of debt. And I just don't think that's healthy. I don't think that's good. And I think that it forces you to make career choices you wouldn't otherwise make. It would keep you, for instance, with that amount of debt, where the entrepreneurs going to come from? The people who can take a chance. When I got out of school, I had to work an entire summer to pay off my student loans. Boo hoo. That's 40 years ago, but we had tremendous grants and things like that in Canada. So I wasn't held back. I didn't start life with a debt that would be equal to buying a house. And that's the one disadvantage that I think that I would eliminate if I could.
And what about from a positive? What's the number one thing you'd hold on to, apart from the obvious?
It's the breadth of learning. We don't know what we don't know, and we don't know what we're going to need. And you can get so narrowly focused. And this is why I'm in favor of trades. I'm in favor of apprenticeships. But when I was in high school, you divided into the trade school or the academics. I I like to work with my hands. I like to fix things, but you're straight A. You don't want to be with the trade guys, right? And the same thing, you're in the trades program, so you're not going to take Shakespeare seriously. You're not. And I just find that takes people too early in life and puts them on a path that says you're this and you're this. And I think that's a big mistake because you're not that. I think it's Eric Hoffer. I think was my favorite philosopher. I think that's the name. He wrote on work on the water side. A philosopher who loaded ships, right? And one of the more brilliant people of our time in terms of philosophy. People are they can be what they want to be and be everything they want to be. And I think that's the world. And this narrowness also makes you brittle. You can be the best, and everybody say, well, get into the trades of being an electrician. I don't know if anybody's ever done that work. It's hard work. It's taxing on the body. Not everybody can make a full 30 years or whatever it is to retirement at that. But if you're stuck in that, that's all you know, that's all you've learned, and you have nothing else to bridge your learning to, you're pretty much trapped into an occupation, and that shouldn't happen. And when occupations disappear, and they will at a rate, this is not an alarmist. I'm a practical man, but I'm going to tell you, you won't recognize the job landscape in 5 years with artificial intelligence. I mean, we've got robots that are stocking shelves now. You know, we've got so if you're that brittle, if you're that focused on one particular occupation, what do you do if that disappears?
I'm totally with you. I think one of the things that we often look at is we measure high performing school systems, education systems around the world. And we often use a very rigid measure in terms of academic progress around some core subjects. And one of the topics that I often talk about, something I've been involved in working with the OECD, is changing our measurement of high performing education systems to be systems that promote human flourishing. And in effect, that would be, how do we build in that pliability, that happiness, that inquisitiveness, and those skills in the broadest sense to an individual, not just the acquisition of knowledge.
Yeah, we have to get rid of grades. I mean, we're how many hundreds of years are we into academics since the first university in you know in whatever, and we still have grades. It's stupid.
Yeah.
It you know, I think what Churchill said about democracy, that it's the worst system, except for everything else. Maybe grades are the worst system you got, except for everything else. But we're smart people. We should be able to measure the capacity of a person, the learning capacity, the things that they're able to do in a better way than grades, because grades are worse in this world of likes and stuff like that. I've had, you know, when I taught at university, my favorite thing to do was to walk down the hall so that somebody could come to me and tell me, why didn't I get an A? You know, because I got an A in high school. Why didn't I get an A? Well, you didn't get an A because I wanted to point out that you've got a gap between what this paper is and what it could be. So if you want to talk about that, I'm willing to talk about it. I'm not willing to talk about changing your grade. I mean, and it gets worse as you get along. I've had students who got into my face and said, I want a better grade. I said, I want a smarter student. Neither one of us is going to get this. Now, you probably don't want to use that as your basic line, but when somebody gets in your face, I think you have a little leniency.
I think there's some common ground there. I think there's a general shift, certainly, to considering more that we empower more of our educators to undertake their formative assessment, and perhaps the idea that after a number of years we take a short snapshot over a few hours, and that is the defining moment, as being something we need to reflect on. Certainly when we think as we get older, we go to college, universities, we don't get judged just on that exam at the end. We've got, throughout the year, we've got checkpoints over that period where we're adding to that knowledge bank.
But
and I
here's the
agree.
secret: nobody cares. When did you graduate?
I graduated, I shouldn't be dating myself like this, but I was being 1988.
Yeah, I'm way back in there, way back before that. Do you know how many people I graduated top of my class? I have a certificate that says I'm on the dean's honor list for having straight A's throughout university in there. Do you know how many people have actually asked me that or cared? I hired an MBA one time to because I thought I really thought I needed this person. I needed a set of skills, so I hired a person, good school, an MBA, and so I gave him a task on some stuff, some data to analyze, and give him all that. Came back that was just total crap. Great school, good. You know, he graduated, and I presumed he had pretty good average in there. And so I said, "What the heck is this?" He said, "I got to see it stats, man." Oh, you know, nobody asks what you got.
I
And
think
10 years
we're
later,
stuck in the
nobody even
past, aren't
asks you.
we?
Yep. Yeah.
We're stuck in that rigid process. The challenges always comes, and I totally understand them. We have gone down quite a rabbit hole on our conversation as planned, but I like rabbit holes when we're talking about topics.
Yeah.
You know, there's a point where we need to capture someone's understanding of their learning, and there's a point where we need to make sure they know enough before they move to the next level of learning, and they've got the foundational skills. So not knowing how accomplished somebody is at mathematics is probably a problem if they're applying to take a college or university degree in advanced mathematics. You are right, though, as we get further up the chain and further towards the workplace, whereas previously those grades and certificates really held some merit, nowadays it's much more about what can you do. and
Yeah.
it's much more, the old filtering and selection process for employers. I think it's become much more nuanced now. People want to know about those broader skills base, not just their ability to study and deliver on a qualification. And I think somewhere along the line, it's never really published. Many of the grading systems were a reverse metric to actually evidence the performance of the establishments as much as the
Yep.
people. That's that oversight. So I think there's definitely a journey there where hopefully we will, in the same way as the world is rapidly changing, education is, I think, on a path where it has no choice but to adapt along that stream as well.
Yeah.
Shall we talk about
And it can.
technology, Jim?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. Sorry. Let's
No,
talk
no,
about something I'm supposed to be skilled at. Yeah. I know.
well, I love talking about skills and education, but I'm also mindful, given your background, it seems like you've already given me a bit of a segue, because we're all in different ways somewhat preoccupied with recognizing that the world is changing fast. For somebody in the technology space, if I mention Moore's law, it's probably something you're going to be familiar with. But
Yep.
we're in this constant cycle where everything's getting faster and more powerful, and things are speeding up. The workplace, the tools that we have, and the skills that we need in the workplace are evolving at a rapid pace. AI has gone from being something in the background to the foreground in recent months, let alone years. And the pace of change on that is such that a year from now, the advancements will be huge. So I'm interested from your point of view, how do you see the perception, both within the technology sector and the broader remit? Because with change, there comes fear. There comes a kind of a first approach of, well, the best way to deal with change and new technology is to turn it off, block it, stop it. And then it's, how do we utilize it to our advantage? How do we adapt to leverage it? I'm interested in your thoughts around that broader topic of AI and how it's changing us.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing because there's a number of perspectives you could tackle the answer to that from. But the biggest one is we don't appreciate it. We appreciate academically, or not. I'm sorry, we use academic as a pejorative. I mean, in our mind, we appreciate that AI is going to do something, but we're like the weavers who are staring at the mills with our with our looms, sitting there going, we'd never figure we just cannot comprehend that gap between where our skills got replaced by something else. And we're in the same point. We can't comprehend what's going to happen right now, and we're not. So we're sort of in denial, was Mark Twain not a river in Egypt? We're there thinking we and talking like we know what's going on, but we really don't understand it. And we're on the verge of a total revolution in terms of what work is going to be, and how that's going to affect society, and how it's going to affect everybody. And we're whistling past the graveyard, talking about dumb stuff like, will AI take over the world? Well, it will if we're this dumb. And it'll probably be, but no, it's not going to take over the world. That's not the biggest disruption that's going to happen. What's going to happen is jobs and whole classes of jobs are going to disappear more or less overnight. And how are you going to cope with that? And when you get to, and there are all kinds of different ways that the economy is going to be stretched, and it's going to be a lot different. um you know and
It
so
opens up a
that
lot of
part
questions.
we're picking on. Or-
It does open up a lot of questions. There's a natural persuasion with anything that changes that governments, organizations in general, look at ways to regulate, monitor, and it's a natural and a right thing that you want to look at ways to have that oversight and governance. The challenge, of course, is that the speed of looking at creating policy and oversight is happening far slower than the speed of change. So you're never going to be at that front line. The question I think, which is kind of relevant because it's something we often discuss within the education space, because there's conversations, will AI replace teachers? Well, the view is always that technology will help make certain processes faster, quicker, more efficient, but equally it will provide opportunity to have more capacity to focus on the human skills, the bits where technology doesn't have its strength. And so
yeah
for me, it's always a case of, there's risk, but there's also opportunity if it's used to actually empower humans to do the bits we're good at.
yeah but it's not sometimes the question is not we're not thinking about it in the right way, at least in the near term. So if you're in a university setting or a college setting, it's not that it's going to replace professors, but there's going to be a whole lot less teaching assistants, you know, and 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 if you have a whole lot less teaching assistants, who becomes the next professors? And the same thing in the legal world. We're not going to have a lot less lawyers next while, but all those law students who come in and they spend 20 hours a day reading and doing all of that grunt work, what happens when that feeder system is no longer there? These are the things that
Yeah.
we're just not seeing as have that could have a very dramatic effect on just the way certain things are structured and how we're going to deal with them.
If we take that kind of thought process and we think about within your readership, obviously, um, IT world you've got your readers. There's lots for people within the technical space, technical jobs. I guess there's reporters, IT writers, all sorts of different skills. What's
Yep.
the general mindset about how these new, again, things like large language models and so on? How's the perception about how that might reshape the sector from a tech perspective?
Again, and I don't say this. I had a conversation with one of my writers who was saying, well, it's not accurate. It can't do this sort of stuff. And I looked at him and said, you write about technology, no matter how primitive this is. And I said, you take a look at any piece of technology first hit the market. And how primitive was it? It was very primitive. How fast did it accelerate? It accelerated very quickly. Right now, when you are in an airplane, it's landed by technology and you're safer, and that happened over a relatively short period of time, and that time gets compressed. So, and he looked at me finally, he said, "You're right." He said, "I'm just being resistant, aren't I?" And yeah, you are. I mean, but the same thing, the thing in coding, which is like programming, is a huge skill. You- I'm not saying today you can replace coders with AI, but it's not far. And so if one person can do all the coding for Meta, Facebook, and or at least a major part of that in with one tool
Mm,
in a single day, um, you're going to need a lot less programmers. So what are you going to do with that? So and I don't think anybody's thinking in those terms. Um, Part of it is there's so much of momentum from baby boomers still who are close to retirement, and I honestly think that's a sad part of. I've been quite critical of my own generation in terms of where we're leaving our kids and where we're leaving the future of the world. We destroyed the climate. No, we'll mess up the economy and we'll retire. Thank you. To take a bow generation, because I think there's really the power is held by a group of people right now who are closer to retirement than not, and I think that is hurting our ability to look at progress and where we need to go.
I'm with you. I think certainly your analogy in terms of the timeline, it feels in the space of 12 months we've gone from DOS to Windows XP, and it's accelerating all the time in terms of that AI journey.
Yep.
I Go ahead, Jim.
OpenAI will be a million times smarter in 2 years. I don't think there's anybody who disputes a million times smarter in 2 years.
Yep.
Like, yeah, it's like anything else. The acceleration of it comes. If you follow any technology, we did this in my book, and I do digital transformation in the first person. Be the second person to buy a copy. No, I'm just kidding. But I drew that graph of how fast technology got adopted and how it gets faster and faster and faster and faster each time. If you draw a line, you're going to get to incredibly rapid adoption, and we'll get there.
Yeah. I'm absolutely with you. I'm conscious of time on our conversation. Just to wrap things up, we've talked about that need for more awareness about the changing jobs landscape and how technology and that accelerating pace of change affects within the tech sector. Just kind of wrapping things up, what would you say for those of our listeners who come from the education space? What are the things that you think education needs to be working towards, given some of the changes in technology? We've touched on a few bits, I guess, in terms of the bigger picture, but are there any other particular areas that you think are directly transferable?
have an impact on someone's life. Let's go back to that old idea. Don't worry about the dean and the bell curving and the marking and all that sort of stuff. Have an impact on someone's life. The professors I had when I went back to university empowered me, enabled me, helped me understand the world, and I am tremendously grateful to every one of them. And that used to be the model of teaching, that you'd wait to meet somebody 15 years later, they meet them and they had an impact on them. When that happened to me, my heart was full. And that's what I'm saying is let's be people in this. I understand. I get the rest of it. I've done part of the job, not as a full-time educator, but let's go back to having an impact and passing on the joy of learning. And there's no greater gift you can give to anybody. If you give it to one student or 10 or 12, you've made a big change in the world.
I'm absolutely with you. And as a way of kind of closing the loop, I would say some of the best educators that I know themselves are transformative in the first person, which is a nice way of linking to your book, which for those listening, I would love you just to share how people could find out more about your book, as well as finding out more about IT World.
Yeah, we're itworldcanada.com, or you can look up #trending, my weekly podcast. It's on everywhere you get podcasts, or at itworldcanada.com/podcasts. Digital transformation in the first person is a really neat story of the real experience of transforming a business, and that's on. You can get that on Amazon, in the bookstore, or on Kindle or anything like that. But or write me. I am absolutely easy to find on LinkedIn or anywhere, and I write everybody back who writes me.
Perfect. We'll make sure we also share those contact details in the notes that support this broadcast, whether it's on audio or on YouTube. Jim, thank you so much for making time. It's been a pleasure to chat with you and hear some of your thoughts and insights. And I hope we can do it again soon.
On our national broadcaster, we say it's really nice to meet you on the radio. and it's a wonderful compliment. It's great to meet you on the podcast.
Indeed. Take care, sir. Thank you.
Take care. Thanks.